Prize 2018. Jeremy Dutcher.
That is this year's winner of one of Canada's most prestigious music awards, the Polaris Prize. Jeremy Dutcher was partly raised in Tobique First Nation in New Brunswick. He recorded his entire debut album in the endangered language of Wolostoq in hopes of preserving his roots. And joining us now, the winner himself, Jeremy Dutcher. And so before we ask you about making this album, which is really incredible, this project, and I'm sure it's a big part of your life, how are you feeling after this win?
It's almost hard to describe. It's really, I'm feeling incredibly celebratory today. You know, this is a culmination of about 5 years of work of an elder of mine who encouraged me to go to the archive and to start doing this work, digging into our old music. And so from that point, the research to the transcription, to the arrangements, to the recording, it's all been such a fluid and long process. So for me, this is you know, this is the closing a little of a circle. You know, they were there last night. Yeah. Those elders that planted that seed, you know, they were in the room and ready to receive that and see all that recognition. You know, all that recognition that was in the room that is sort of unfathomable to their generation of Indigenous people. You know.
Really?
Of course.
What did they say after the awards?
I think, you know, all that could be said is an expression of pride. And an expression of the continuation of Indigenous Wolostoq song tradition. And it's just, we build one layer on top of the next every generation, you know? And I feel like with this, we're going in such a good way.
With this win?
Yeah.
It amplifies it.
Absolutely, you know, to levels that are not just affecting my people or my nation, but are affecting Indigenous people from coast to coast. You know, I got to connect with Snotty Nose Res kids, who were also Polaris nominees last night.
Nice.
Indigenous guys from the West Coast, and they had some very beautiful things to say around what this work in our language does.
Yes.
And even though they can't understand the language, it's still talking about language, and it's still coming from that place of front-loading our languages and making sure that they are centered.
Yes.
And so that, for me, I hope is a message that goes out to the rest of
And you went on Twitter describing something along those lines of saying that we're experiencing an Indigenous renaissance. What is that?
Ready?
Such a powerful, I don't know it. Am I ready? Are we? What is that going to be like?
I mean, it's been happening for a while. And I think you look at things like the Aldo No More movement, you look at artists like A Tribe Called Red and Tanya Tagaq, people that are pushing the conversation forward. And you also look at the big art prizes in this country, you know, Gillard, Sobey Prize, Polaris Prize. We are saying something right now. So my challenge to Canada was, are you listening? Are you ready to hear it? Because there's so many lessons within that worldview, within those languages even.
What will we hear in your album that took you those years to build and create, your debut album?
So you're gonna hear old voices. So part of this research project was to go into the archive and to research these voices from 110 years ago that were collected among my people. And so when you listen to the record, you can hear their voices come through, and I get to sing with them too. So you're gonna witness, when you listen to this record, a conversation between past, present, and future. And so I hope you enjoy.
I can imagine, you know, when do you feel like that project is finished?
It's never finished, you know. Actually, somebody asked me this last night, and it started, like I said, with my elder, and she said, you know, when I hear those old songs, I hear symphonies. And so I think that's where it's headed. Yeah. I think we're gonna take it to the concert hall. You know, I studied as a classical musician. The concert hall is something that's very comfortable for me, but to go in on my own terms and share our music in our language from our perspective, this is what I want to see.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's so many iterations and things that need to be done. There's so many stories that need to be told, that need to come out. So, so for me, this is just the beginning of a life's work.
What about keeping the language alive?
Oh, I mean,
is that your life's work now?
Absolutely. I think to do this to my first record, debut record in my language, no translations, was a very important statement for me. You know, particularly around the vulnerability or precarity of our languages too. For Wolostoqiyik, which is the language that this album's in, there's less than 100 fluent speakers left. You know, and not one generation ago, that was the only language that was spoken in the community. So think about how fast things change.
It's a short period of time, one
Hugely,
generation.
you know?
Yeah.
And that's what education does. You know, when you take kids out of community and you teach them in a way that devalues who they are and says, this at home, that's not enough. You know, you have to learn our way. But what about when we flip that? What about when we empower people to learn their languages?
Yeah.
You know? This, for me, has ripple effects that aren't yet seen. But that's, I guess, the promise of this work. And for me, that's the hope.
Yeah, Jeremy, I really wish you all the best. I hope we are listening to this renaissance as you describe, and I'm looking forward to following your career. All the best.
We'll see you there.
Thank you for joining us. Jeremy Dutcher joining us here, the 2018 Polaris Prize winner.